The year is 1985. Ronald Reagan has just taken office. Everyone's listening to a-ha's new hit Take On Me on their Walkmans. Your mom probably just finished getting her hair done up like this, and the Coca-Cola Company has just abandoned their tried and true Coke formula in favor of New Coke. For those of you who have never heard of New Coke, it was the result of a misguided attempt on Coca-Cola's part to take back some of the customers whom they lost to the rising giant Pepsi in recent years. The idea behind New Coke was essentially to mimic Pepsi's formula, since that's what the lost customers seemed to prefer. But as any first-year business major can probably tell you, their plan backfired catastrophically. You see, the problem was the people who liked Pepsi already had a brand that they liked, Pepsi. And they weren't going to switch back to Coke just because they were now slightly more similar to what they were used to. On the other hand, however, Coca-Cola forgot about the people who already were drinking Coke. You see, those people, believe it or not, preferred Coke to Pepsi, which is why they were drinking it. But now Coke tasted really similar to Pepsi and they didn't like it anymore. So what you ended up with was a product that didn't quite become similar enough to its competitor to satisfy any of their fans, but it went too far in that direction to where the people who already liked them were now completely alienated. And this, my wandering friends, is exactly what happened to comic book movies in the 21st century. Let me explain. You know what's really popular and has always been really popular? Action movies. Since practically the dawn of cinema, people have enjoyed action movies. We enjoy living out the exciting, heart-pounding adventure of some super spy or soldier on the battlefield before returning to the comfort of our daily lives. On the other hand, you know what has historically not been nearly as popular? Comic book movies. Sure, people have always somewhat enjoyed them, but before the MCU, with only a few notable exceptions, they have not had nearly the mainstream cultural presence that other genres did. And then, for whatever reason, some genius had the New Coke-esque idea that, hey, people like action movies a lot. Action movies make a ton of money. What if we take our comic book movies and we make them more like action movies? It was literally the same thing Coke did in the 80s with the exact same pitfalls. See, what you ended up with were movies that were not quite action movie enough to fully win over the action movie crowd, but it was so far from the comic book source material that comic book fans were left dissatisfied. You know who was already loving comic book movies? Comic book readers. But when you take the characters they love and change the formula around to try and suit a totally different group, you end up ruining a lot of what your current fans already liked about the story. To get a better idea of what I'm talking about, let's take a look at some specific examples. If you haven't already seen it, I put out a video recently talking about what makes the character of Superman interesting. I definitely recommend giving it a watch if you love the character. But in that video, one of the main points I was trying to make is that Superman is a lovable, goofy farm boy first, and an indestructible alien god second, if at all. Man of Steel tried so hard to take the character of Superman and make him quote-unquote cooler to better attract the masses. They took away the sillier aspects of the character, like his red trunks, his ice palace, and his personality, but again, they didn't go far enough for hardcore action movie fans. The people who only go to the theater for a new James Bond movie aren't gonna all of a sudden go see a Superman movie just because he's wearing his underwear on the inside of his pants now. That's just not enough for them. But on the other hand, there was a huge group of diehard comic fans who love Superman, not in spite of, but because he's goofy enough to wear his trunks on the outside of his pants. I hate to put it this bluntly, but Superman isn't supposed to be all that cool. He is cool, but only because he's unapologetically and earnestly himself. He does the things that seem right to him, and if anyone questions why he did them that way, he's just borderline naive about it and is like, I don't know, it just seemed like the right thing to do. That's not what we got with Man of Steel, but it is absolutely what we got in James Gunn's Superman. Oh my gosh, everything about this Superman was so on point. I mean, when he went out of his way while fighting a monster to save a squirrel and place it somewhere safe, I was like, That's my Superman. That's the exact kind of thing a cynic would say, why'd you waste time doing that? And Clark would just be like, I don't know, the little guy was gonna get hurt. On a larger scale, this is what the focus of the plot is in that entire movie. Superman is catching heat for stopping a war in another country, and he's being questioned about how this will look politically and how this will affect international relations between countries. And when Lois presses him about these things, he seems like the thought has never even crossed his mind. To him, people were going to die.
Consider the consequences.
People were going to die!
And he had the ability to stop it, so he did. It's that simple. And that's really what's at the heart of this new Superman and why I loved him so much. Where Man of Steel Superman was trying too hard to be hardcore and intense, cool and, punk rock, if you will, James Gunn brought us back to a Superman whose sole purpose was to be kind and friendly. His whole message is just hope and helping everyone you can and finding everything and everyone beautiful and worthy of trust.
You trust everyone and think everyone you've ever met is, like, beautiful.
Maybe that's the real punk rock.
And that's a version of Superman that's unapologetically much more in line with the comics. Gunn wasn't afraid to make Superman a dork who loved everybody and everything, who wore bright colors and spent his time saving people simply because it was the right thing to do. If you need further proof that this was a Superman who was, by design, just not worried about looking cool, look no further than what Clark Kent himself, David Cornsweet, had to say about why his version of Superman kept the red trunks.
You wanted trunks in theory. You liked the idea of trunks.
Theoretically, I liked the idea of trunks because it's, Superman I grew up with.
But the problem is they look kind of silly. You were looking for a way to make them look cool, or you were looking for a function, an explanation for having them.
A reason why they would be there, yeah.
And my thing was just maybe they're supposed to look a little silly. Maybe the reason he wears them is to look a little silly, basically to undermine how powerful he really is.
Take special note of what he said about trying to justify the trunks through some kind of in-universe reason or function before eventually deciding that that just wasn't necessary, because we're going to come back to that idea in a minute. The other franchise that suffered even more than Superman, in my opinion, from this action movie-ification of comic book films was Fantastic Four. Just look at the Fantastic Four movies we've gotten over the past 20 years. In the early 2000s, they made Fantastic Four movies that tried to stay true to the comics, but they still couldn't help grounding everything in reality just a little bit. Like, yes, they wear the classic Fantastic Four suits, but only because they're these advanced flight suits and they were altered by the same cosmic rays that gave them their powers.
Our uniforms were exposed to the storm, like us, so they can transform like us, becoming invisible, changing size on demand, or remaining impervious to flame.
And yeah, the suits have the four on them, but only because Johnny's a rebel and he modified them all without asking the rest of the team. See, they're including the things from the comic books, but they're giving into this need that Cornsweet was talking about with the Superman trunks. The need to somehow justify those comic booky aspects in universe, lest they come off just a little too silly and out of place to the general audience. Another place you can see this in these movies is in how the characters all get their comic book names. They get the names they had in the comics, but every time they come up for the first time, it almost feels like a character is stumbling upon the name or using it ironically, and then it kind of just sticks.
So what are your superhero names?
They call me the Human Torch. Ladies call me Torch. That's the Invisible Girl.
What about your leader, Reed Richards? I hear you call him Mr. Fantastic.
Could have been worse.
What do you call that thing?
That's it. The Thing.
Only this entity, this Silver Surfer. People running the Earth are the same ones running it into the ground, so maybe it deserves what it's got coming to it.
Dr. Doom over here.
Huh?
Like, they really don't trust us to just accept the fact that these characters would choose to call themselves these things because they just sound too silly. Then in 2015, we got this dark, super serious version of the characters. It feels like what might actually happen if people got these powers from an accident in real life. Like they're immediately coerced by the government into being their stooges.
He's been active in covert operations with a 100% success rate.
And they get these black, unadorned, utilitarian suits because why would they have colorful costumes? They aren't a team of superheroes, they're just 4 people with freakish abilities. It's honestly depressing solely because it's so accurate. Like, I think if I woke up tomorrow with superpowers, this is realistically what my life would end up looking like, and I hate it.
No! God, please, no! No! No!
We develop suits which allow them to contain and control these conditions.
They're gonna send me on a project.
Like Ben?
It's an honor to meet you, Mr. Grimm. We appreciate all you're doing for us.
Well, that was the deal, right?
Like, the first time I tried to use my powers to help someone, the government would show up on my doorstep and disappear me. And I'd live the rest of my days out as some CIA black site or something. If I had to describe the way this movie feels about its source material in one word, I think that word would probably be ashamed.
Shame. Shame. Shame.
It feels like they're embarrassed to be even related to comic books at all.
We should use these powers to do something.
They're not powers. They're aggressively abnormal physical conditions that we're gonna fix. Can you turn that off? They're not powers. They're aggressively abnormal physical conditions that
They're not powers. They're aggressively abnormal physical conditions.
Is this fun? Is it fun to watch or even make movies like this? I don't know, but this seems like a good time to bring up. If you were hesitant about subscribing, just know that I sat down and watched this entire movie for you guys. So if you could help me out and make my suffering worth it, that'd be fantastic.
Say that again.
They want so badly to distance themselves from their own source material in an effort to reinvent themselves, and in doing so, they disrespect that source material and the people who love it. We don't need storytellers who are ashamed of where their stories come from. We need ones who embrace it, and embrace the audiences who love those stories for what they are. And this is exactly what we got in the summer of 2025. We get this version of the Fantastic Four that unapologetically wear these bright, silly costumes because why not? They're superheroes, they don't need to justify it. That's what they wore in the comics, why wouldn't they wear them here? Why wouldn't they use the name Fantastic Four in an unironic way? That's their name. Why wouldn't they devote their lives to helping the people of the world and stopping crises and saving lives? That's what everyone would want to do with their life if they woke up with the powers these characters have, right? And it's not just the costumes that the movies did this trend with. Like, I know I'm spending a lot of time on that, but it can be seen in pretty much every aspect of these stories. Just look at the way the films I've discussed portray the famous buildings from the comics. You seeing a trend here? Or how about in the depictions of these minor supporting characters? Wait. What? Yeah, you'll never convince me this man doesn't hate Superman. Or look how they deal with their most famous villains. The 2000s version of Fantastic Four gives us Galactus, Devourer of Worlds.
Galactus, Devourer of Worlds.
But it asks this question, what would an entity that devours planets look like if it was in the real world? And they try to go with that look. The 2025 version gives us Galactus, Devourer of Worlds. And it only asks the question, what does Galactus look like in the comics? Oh, he's a skyscraper-sized man in a purple suit with a planet-sized ship? Okay, let's do that then. Why would we do it any differently? And I think that's really the best way to sum up what happened to comic book movies for a while in the 21st century. They set out to ask the question, what would this superhero look like? Someone with their powers and their backstory and their villains, if they were dropped into the real world. But the thing is, comic book worlds are different than our world by design. They're weirder and filled with these strange abilities and creatures, and because of that, the superpowered characters, colorful costumes, and goofy names all feel right at home. They don't need to be explained away with in-universe reasons, they just fit. And that's why we love comics in the first place. You don't open a comic or go to a comic book movie for a dose of realism. You go for a little escapism. You go to see a world more fantastic and strange than ours could ever be. A world where those granted fantastic abilities end up as superheroes who save lives, not government black ops agents. And that's why I love, among other things, the lengths James Gunn went to emphasize that the world of the DCU is filled with these kinds of abnormalities. I love this scene where a giant monster is attacking the city, and this dude is content to just drink his coffee and watch the metahumans deal with it. Or this scene where Clark is talking to Lois while the Justice Gang fights a giant dimensional imp in the background, showcasing that it's really not a big deal in this world for these kind of things to happen. The things we can't even imagine happening in real life are commonplace here, and I think that's beautiful. I want to watch comic book movies and feel transported to the world of a comic book where literally anything can happen. That is, in my opinion, much more fun than watching a comic book movie that brings a comic book character into our world. And that's why I'm so genuinely excited by what these new movies represent. They're a breath of fresh air and a true return to form for a genre that needed it now more than ever. And by the way, it's not just these two franchises that are doing this. While I think they exemplify it better than anything I've seen yet, this trend of kind of earnest attempt that still holds back a little, followed by overly grounded and serious version, followed by true surrender to the source material, it's happening all throughout the comic book movie genre.
Thanks.
I'm vengeance. You actually go outside in these things? What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
And I, for one, am so here for it. As a longtime lover of comic books and superheroes in general, I was definitely getting a little worried that superhero fatigue was going to kill a genre that I really enjoyed before it even had a chance to fully come into its own. But projects like these give me hope that there are still storytellers out there who aren't just unashamed of where their stories come from, they're actually proud of it. They don't feel that need to be something they're not, to try and appeal to a fan base that doesn't want them as they're meant to be, at the expense of fans who already love them as they are. I believe these movies are not merely blips of authenticity in a sea of self-serious adaptations, but proof that the comic book movie genre's best days are set firmly ahead. That comic book movies aren't on the decline. They're about to be better than ever. With luck, this is the start of an era where we can be more excited than ever to go to the theaters for a new superhero movie adaptation, and know that we are truly about to be transported to an exciting new world, see things that inspire us, and be reminded that maybe life doesn't always have to be so serious. And if you ask me, that's about as punk rock as it gets.
1, 2, 3, 4!
Hello friends, Wandering Storyteller here. I just wanted to say thank you guys so much for sticking around to this point in the video. I really do appreciate it. I want to hear what you guys think. Did comic book movies in the 21st century go too far? Are we on the track to getting better comic book movies in the future? Or is superhero fatigue really about to take over and comic book movies are a thing of the past? Please let me know what you think down in the comments, and if you enjoy videos like this one, be sure to like and subscribe so you can be part of the next conversation.